going 60 hours without sleep, you're hallucinating, you're seeing things, you're not thinking straight. I thought, I'm going to hang on to this rock for the rest of my life.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Essentially Sports Fancast. Today we have an extraordinary guest from the aquatics world. He's known as the man with no fears, a man considered best friend by the Coast Guard, a man who proves nothing is impossible, and most importantly a man who almost saved Detroit from bankruptcy. So, I would like you all to extend a hearty welcome to Stanley's favorite superhuman, Jim The Shark Dreyer.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be on the show.
Good afternoon. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Terrific.
So, first of all, belated happy birthday, you month. How are you feeling?
Well, yeah, I've turned 60 years old now. And I feel absolutely great. I was kind of worried like as soon as I turned 60, I'm going to feel different. I'm really kind of kidding when I say that. I feel great, and that's, part of what I'm doing is I want to show people age is just a number.
Definitely. And with being 60, you had a very big achievement. So that was, following back to your Lake Michigan, the silver sequel. So how was the experience? I know it had a tricky ending, but how was the experience to jump back again?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great experience, and it certainly was an incredible adventure. And I knew, obviously, I was very disappointed the way things ended, but I knew that, after a little bit of time, I would really appreciate the adventure, that it was. To be able to stand on the shore of Lake Michigan and look at this endless expanse of water that lies well beyond the horizon, and to hook up a dinghy to your waist with 225 pounds of
Yes.
supplies, do your own navigating because you're not going to be able to see shore in any direction,
Yep.
and try to find your way across that lake. It really is about, addressing your fears. I mean, your primal fears, and, reaching beyond that. And that in itself is very liberating, and it makes for a great adventure.
Yes, surely. So just you just spoke about your goggles, right? And we have read that you have some different kinds of goggles, and you have a particular swimsuit that you wear. So what is that all about?
Yeah, the goggles are real cutting edge technology. Um, the company is Vuzix Smart Swim, and basically, I'm able to see my GPS course and my location right on my goggles. So, I mean, that is amazing technology when you cannot see shore in any direction, to be able to just continue swimming and follow a course. Now I
Yep.
did run into some problems that we have to get around, and it's certainly not the fault of the Vuzix Smart Swim, but to power it with batteries. Um, I tried to have a waterproof battery attached to a tether around my waist in a
Yep.
waterproof buoy, and covered it
Mm-hmm.
with silicone, try to make it even more waterproof. And it ended up shorting out.
Yes.
And I had two more battery packs, that I put on the dinghy, and I put them in waterproof bags. And I had a total of three of these Smart Swim Vuzix goggles. So what I
Yep.
did is I was powering two on the charger in the dinghy while I was wearing a third pair. But that did require me to continually go back every couple hours to the dinghy and switch out goggles, where I was hoping to just continue swimming with a battery pack on my back. But that's
Right.
that's one new frontier we still have to figure out.
Yes. So just going back to history, a little bit of history. The first time that you swam in Lake Michigan was around 1988, if I'm not wrong. So what changed? I mean, in 1998, we did not have those kind of resources that we have now. So going back into history, how did you feel when you jumped into the water first time in Lake Michigan?
Yeah, that first swim across Lake Michigan 25 years ago is what started this whole wild ride for me. And so this 25th anniversary I thought was pretty
Yep.
significant. And then you only turn 60 once as well. So I thought this was a great year to do what I tried to do. And, that launched my whole career, swimming across all five Great Lakes, the whole Stanley Superhumans thing, pulling the bricks into Detroit, all those stories that you can find on my website.
Yes. Yep.
And you're right, the technology was completely different back then. Um, but when I swam across Lake Superior, which was 2005, that was my fifth Great Lake. And the way I finally made it across that lake was self-sufficiently, swimming alone, pulling my supplies in a dinghy, just like I attempted this time, just last
Yep.
week. But in 2005, this technology didn't exist either, so that was kind of crazy. Um, I had to swim, and I had a GPS on the dinghy, but you couldn't constantly look at it while you were swimming. So
Yes.
I would get a reading on the GPS, and I'd get a reading on my compass, and I thought, okay, if I need to go due north, I'm hitting the waves right now at a 45-degree angle. So I will keep hitting these waves at a 45-degree angle. And that was the
Yep.
best I could do. And then every so often check my location. And at night you're looking at the
Yes.
stars and the constellations, and you're kind of navigating like the mariners of old used to do. So,
Yes.
all that stuff still works, but man, technology has come a long way.
So just as we are talking about Lake Superior, I believe that there was some issue with your GPS, which turned out to be one of the most hardest challenges of that lake, right? To of your right. So how was the experience? I mean, how it was kind of like you were lost in sea. How did you manage to tackle that, like tackle a grave situation and just come out of it smiling and happy as ever?
Yeah, you bring up a pretty good story. When I crossed Lake Superior in 2005, as I mentioned, I was doing it alone. And,
Yep.
I had it was probably about $750 GPS that was donated by a sponsor, which was very nice. But it did give
Yeah.
out in the middle of the lake. It just quit. It died. And all I had left as a backup was a $6.99 wrist compass. That's
Yes.
it. That
Yes.
I
Yes.
bought at a convenience store at a gas station when I was traveling up there with my crew. And something just told me, buy this. You've got a $750 GPS, but for some reason, Jim, buy this $6.99 wrist compass. It probably saved my life.
Right.
It was so cheap, it didn't have a light on it, didn't even light up at night. I had to mount a flashlight on the front of the dinghy to put my wrist under the flashlight to get my bearing. And that, along with
Yes.
the Northern Lights, came out, which was incredible because I was going due north, and that was a godsend. I mean,
Yes.
to follow the Northern Lights. But it was really, I'll be honest with you, it was pretty scary. When that GPS failed, I'm treading water along the side of that dinghy thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And,
Yep.
that $6.99 wrist compass came through. So, it shows that even with the greatest technology out there, if there's a will, there's a way. And I just kept hitting those
Yeah.
waves at the same angle. And on the third day, I could finally see shore. The adventure wasn't over though. I hit a huge storm, 50-mile-an-hour
Oh,
winds, 15-foot
okay.
waves, lightning striking all around me, and it made getting into shore pretty difficult. Even though I had spotted shore at that point, I lost sight of shore when the storm hit. I ended up stranded when I finally made it and was fighting all these rip currents coming into shore. I ended up on the side of a 100-foot cliff in the middle of nowhere.
Oh God.
And
Okay.
my bones would still be out there if it wasn't for a friend who left port in the storm looking for me and found me and picked me off the side of that cliff. It was a pretty dramatic finish to the swim. I mean, I had made it and I felt great about it, but I was on top of this boulder and I touched the side of the cliff and I had made it, and the waves, these powerful Lake Superior waves
Yeah.
are throwing me against this
That's
cliff,
horrifying.
and they're yelling
Yes.
at me from the boat, Jim, you got to swim back out to the boat because they couldn't get the boat right up to the edge of the cliff, obviously. And 3 days of swimming. After 3 days of swimming, this boulder that I'm trying to hold on to was the first solid object I've had under me in 3 days. And after going 60 hours without sleep, you're hallucinating, you're seeing things, you're not thinking straight. I thought I'm going to
Yes.
hang on to this rock for the rest of my life. But then finally, a huge wave washed me off, and they threw me a life ring and pulled me on the boat. So that whole Lake Superior story was pretty wild.
Yes. So that just makes me think, out of all the five lakes that you have swam, which one would you say was your favorite one?
Favorite? Okay. Well, that Lake Superior swim that I just described was the most difficult. And there is something,
Yes.
that is really special about facing your most difficult challenge and succeeding. So, that makes it a favorite. But actually, my favorite Great Lakes experience was actually in 2003 when I swam the length of Lake Michigan. And that was after an attempt to swim across Lake Superior that fell short. Didn't make it, and crew had to pull me from the water. Really bad conditions out there, and it was getting dangerous for the crew as well. And so I thought, I have all this training. What am I going to do with it? And 12 days later, I was in Michigan City, Indiana, to swim the length of Lake Michigan. Now, this was a staged event. It was 350 miles from Michigan City to the Mackinac Bridge. I'm not sure how many kilometers that translates to, but it's a lot. And I was going to swim it in stages. So it wasn't going to be continuous, but I'd swim like 20 to 25 miles a day. I had a crew follow me up the
Right.
coast in a motorhome.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a great experience because you could watch all the topography change as you're swimming the length of the lake. You're meeting with the media after, every stage. I was swimming to raise money for the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. That was the charity we were
Yes.
supporting. So kids from the program were coming out, and it was a good bonding experience with my crew for like 5 or 6 hours. After a stage, I would eat, I would shower, get a little bit of sleep, and I'd be right back in the water. Didn't matter if it was 3 p.m. or 3 a.m., I'm starting that next stage. So it was 18 consecutive stages, but that 350 miles actually became 422 miles because things happen. I mean, it's hard to keep a straight
Oh,
course.
yes.
And there was a hurricane that had hit the east coast of the United States, hit North and South Carolina really hard. And when it passed over the Great Lakes, we had 20-foot waves out there, and I got caught in that. And it blew me halfway to Wisconsin when I was at near the end of one of my swimming stages. And then I had to fight my way back. So that stage itself was almost 50 miles. And I was out of nutrition. I had like 2 energy gel packets left. And I'm in the middle of Lake Michigan. Had to fight my way all the way back to the Michigan shore. And the thing was, I just had to outlast the storm. If I was still alive when the storm
Yeah.
was over, I had a chance to make it. And I was. But when the storm was
Yes.
over, I had a lot of work to do because I had, you couldn't see shore in any direction. So once again, it's taking out your navigational equipment, making sure you're going the right direction, and eventually shore popped into sight. But no nutrition to speak of, other than the 2 energy gel packets. So when I got to shore, I mean, my legs wouldn't work. I was pulling all my supplies in a kayak from my ankles. I just kind of pulled it up on shore, collapsed over the kayak, and ended up being rescued on the beach.
Yes. But talking about all, overcoming fears and everything, I believe that Lake Ontario was one of your trickiest experiments because you just didn't swim, you connected to a Ironman distance. Like the swim just turned into a triathlon. So how did you manage to do that? I mean, swimming for so long and then, riding a bike and then just, taking up one challenge after another. There was no stopping for Jim Dreyer. So, what was that all about? Did you feel tired at any point?
Yeah, and that was another great experience. Yeah, you're referring to my world record duathlon and my world record triathlon.
Yes.
That was the year 2000. And in
Yep.
1998, I had swam across Lake Michigan. In 1999, I had swam across Lake Huron. Well, I wanted to do Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And of course, I had Lake Superior in my sights. And I thought, well, Lake
Yes.
Erie and Lake Ontario are narrower than Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. So how am I going to keep this interesting? For the media, we're trying to support a cause, and you want people to donate to that charity, which was Big Brothers Big Sisters. And so I thought, you got to keep it interesting. It's not, you're going to lose interest if you're doing a swim that's, shorter than the swims you've already done. Well, I
Yeah.
was a triathlete to begin with, so I knew I could run and bike as well as swim. So I thought, well, what if I did those two lakes as a continuous multi-sport event? So the plan was to swim across Lake Erie, and then that was going to be a 26. No, that was going to be, yeah, about a 26-mile swim, and then
26 miles. Yep.
I was gonna do an Ironman run, 26.2, well, marathon run, 26.2 mile run along the sandy peninsula of Long Point. So 17.1 of those miles was going to be in beach sand. So a rough little run. And then I was going to end up in Port Rowan, Ontario, Canada, where then I was going to bike 112 miles an Ironman distance bike segment to Lake Ontario, and then a 32-mile swim into Toronto. That was the plan.
Right.
Well, I did the swim. It ended up being 30.4 miles instead of 26. I did the run, 26.2 miles into Port Rowan, Ontario through the beach sand. And then I collapsed and lost consciousness before I could get on the bike. And so,
Yeah.
that was disappointing, even though that had set a solo world distance duathlon record. I had been told that no one had ever swam double digit mileage in a swim combined with Ironman distance running and biking. So nobody had done double digits, and I had just done a 30-mile swim. So I
Yeah.
went back to the drawing board, and I thought, one of the things that the medical people and my nutritional people and I the conclusion we came to is it's very difficult to go from exerting horizontally to swim for the length of time it takes to get across the Great Lake and then go vertical and start running and biking. You tend to want to lose consciousness. Your heart's been pumping blood horizontally for all that time. Now all of a sudden it's got to pump uphill. And
Right.
that's part of the problem. And so you have to really acclimate if you're going to do it in that order. So I thought, well, what if I did the swim last? Did all the vertical stuff first, did the horizontal stuff last, which is against conventional triathlon wisdom, which I understand. Any event organizer doesn't want a bunch of tired swimmers getting in the water. So I went to the shores of Lake Erie, where I finished the first swim across Lake Erie, and I did the run again. This is a month later. I did the run again, 26.2
Mm-hmm.
miles, mostly through the sand. Biked what turned out to be 130 miles, not 112. We took a wrong turn, 130 miles up to Niagara on the Lake, and then swam to Toronto, Ontario, and completed the triathlon. And then I surprised people because I said, well, I think I'm going to do a double crossing of the lake. I'm going to swim back. Now, the record had already been achieved. The triathlon record had already been achieved.
Yeah.
But originally, I said I was going to swim Erie and Ontario in the same event. Well, I wasn't able to do that because I had to save all the swimming for last after the running and biking for the reasons I said to stay conscious. So I said, well, then I'm going to do a double crossing of the lake. And I almost made it. I was just 13 miles short of a double crossing when a storm forced us from the water. So it was a world record and then plus a little extra distance. But, I felt really, really good through the whole thing. I got 15 hours of sleep afterwards because this took 14 hours and 13 minutes of continuous running, biking, and swimming. But after 15 hours of sleep, I really didn't even have a sore muscle. So my training was right on. And it was kind of surprising. I mean, it was
Right.
almost a little freakish that I felt as good as I did. But that was one of the highlights of my career, certainly.
Yes. 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 So throughout your life, you have always been fighting storms. But one thing that intrigues me a lot is you had written that you almost drowned as a kid when your sister found you floating, right? Face down floating. So going from a near death experience and taking that as a challenge to make it your biggest achievement in life, what was the mindset? How did you overcome that fear?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that the open water was my greatest fear in life. Um, and I thought to myself, if I face my life's greatest fear, every other hurdle I face in life is going to be that much smaller. So I was really
Yes.
encouraged to learn to swim. And I also always admired triathletes. But the thing that kept me back was, well, I knew I could run, I knew I could bike. But if I'm going to be a triathlete, that's going to force me to put my face in the water, which is my greatest fear. So I thought, you know what, Jim, you need to face your greatest fear. And so I went to the swimming pool and I thought I was going to teach myself how to swim. And I'll say that doesn't work very well because I was swimming like Tarzan.
Yes.
I was like vertical in the water, like as vertical as a person who was standing. And, I'm just plowing through the water like
Yes.
that. And this gentleman by the name of Mike Landis, who happened to be a swimming coach, I didn't know it at the time, he came down to the side of the pool and he introduced himself. And he said, I introduced myself as well. And he said, Jim, he says, I'm getting tired just watching you swim. He said, but I must
Right.
admit, he says, I'm impressed with your endurance. He says, I have never seen anybody swim 12 straight lengths of the pool completely vertical like you just did. He said, you've got an incredible amount of endurance. I thought, oh, do I? So he said, if you come back next Thursday, we can start swimming lessons. I could make this a lot easier for you. So I did. I came back and worked with him. Now, here's the funny thing. I thought it was just going to be me and him one on one with the coach. I came back and it was a bunch of little kids.
Yeah.
They were all about up to here. They were like
Yeah.
5 and 6 year olds, and it was me. So those are my humble beginnings. I mean, I really had to swallow my pride. And those kids were braver than I was. And so it was a long road. But once I started to learn some technique, because I had none, I didn't want to put my face in the water. I had no technique. Once I started to learn some technique, people noticed that I could just swim and swim and swim. And I just didn't seem to tire. And they were telling me that was very unusual. And I didn't know it was unusual because I had nothing to compare it to. So, what I really learned from the experience is, like I said, if you face your life's biggest fear, every other hurdle seems that much smaller. It's really liberating to face your life's biggest fears. And the other thing is, if you face your fears, you might discover some talents and skills you never knew you had, if your fears are
Yep.
holding you back. So, my advice to people is, man, go for it. True courage is not a person without
Yeah.
fear. A person without fear is really more foolish than they are courageous. Courage is taking steps to face your fear and not letting it hold you back and then pushing past it.
Just moving forward to 2013, when the whole Detroit situation happened. I mean, the country was almost about to file for bankruptcy, and you came in and you swooped in as a hero. And your motivation and dedication almost helped the city to get back on track. And I must say that landed you on Stanley's Superhumans. So, how do you feel about that?
Oh, yeah. Another incredible experience. And certainly, yeah, I take pride in it. And I would like to think that I helped the situation in Detroit. I'm sure there was a lot more involved than just me in getting that city back on its feet. But, living here in Michigan in the United States, Detroit is our largest city here. I'm also a big Detroit
Yes.
sports fan. I'm wearing a Detroit Tigers baseball cap here.
Yes.
And and so, when the city filed for bankruptcy, I mean, I really took notice. And I mentioned that I did a lot of swimming for Big Brothers Big Sisters. Well,
Yep.
at
Yep.
that time, I was swimming for Habitat for Humanity. Another great program. And they had a program going on called Rebuild Michigan. And then when Detroit
Yes.
filed for bankruptcy, I actually got with them and said, well, what can we do by starting to rebuild Detroit? And I came up with this idea because I had finished swimming across Lake Superior, pulling all the weight of my own supplies and doing my own navigating. When I swam the length of Lake Michigan, I also pulled the weight of my supplies. And
Yes.
so I thought, I'm getting used to pulling weight. What if I pulled a ton of bricks, 2,000 pounds, across Lake St. Clair, which was 22 miles, pulled it into Detroit, and we sold the bricks as commemorative items. That certainly might help. And nothing like that had been done before. And so here I am. It
Yes.
was definitely a pioneering effort, and I made it. It took 52 hours. I mean, plenty of things happened. swimming against. I actually swam against the current the entire time, which
Yeah,
was
yeah,
unusual. Which was unusual
yes.
for Lake St. Clair. Swimming north to south, you're usually with the current. This time it was against the current. So pulling a ton of bricks over, 3 to 4 foot waves. I've been in a lot bigger waves, but when you're pulling a ton of bricks, that's a big wave. It's like pushing a car continuously over speed bumps, is kind of like what it was like. So 52 hours later, I arrive in Detroit, you know, and we got a press conference on the beach. And, I joke that the governor of Michigan was concerned that I was running for his position, which was not the case. But during the press conference, I said, if one man can swim 22 miles pulling a ton of bricks and keep his head above water, then doesn't it stand to reason that we do not have to sink with the weight of our financial burdens if we all pull together? Which sounds like a political
Yes.
statement.
That is the quote that you live by.
But
Yep.
we sold these bricks as commemorative items to help rebuild Detroit. But I think the bigger thing was the message of hope. A lot of people in Detroit had given up hope. And, I wanted to show them, look, we can all pull together and pull ourselves out of this. And I think that message was received loud and clear. And that's kind of the thing I feel the best about is the people who've expressed that to me. Like, Jim, you really gave us a lot of hope and we needed hope. And man, it's hard to put a price on that. You know what I mean?
Yes, that is priceless. Apart from giving hope to the people of Detroit, or I would probably say to everybody in the US, you also landed up on Stanley's Superhumans, and you were partnered with the powerlifting pastor. So, did you actually meet Stanley? Was there a moment that you guys shared, or any special moment that you would like to tell us from that time?
Yes. Yeah. Stan Lee, man, he's an icon, Marvel comic icon around the world. So I mean that was a real thrill, to meet Stan. And I also, like, if you go to my personal Facebook page or on my website page, the Stanley Superhuman page on my website, there's a copy of the artwork that he drew of me
Yes,
as the human
yes,
tugboat. So here's the creator of the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man, and he's drawing me, as a superhuman. I mean, that was so flattering. I mean, really flattering. So I mean, I've got that in my basement in my man cave. That was a thrill in and of itself. But to get that call, they wanted me on Stanley's Superhumans after I pulled the brick. We were first brainstorming, me and Stan's team. Okay, what is it I should do for the show? And we kicked around a lot of ideas, and finally, um, it was going to be December before we were going to be able to film this. And there's only so many places in the U.S. where you could do a swim like that. It's got to be in the South. In the North, it's going to be way too cold to do a December swim. So I ended up in California, Newport Beach, and the goal was to pull a 27-ton car ferry across Newport Beach Harbor. And so I actually went out there in November to give it a try, and we were actually in a storm when I was attempting it. So the currents were really bad. Now you've got ocean tides too that you have to contend with, and nothing like that had been done. And so we're trying to do the math, figuring out, well, if I can do this, how long is it going to take? And I thought, well, I really do believe I can do this, but I think it's going to take 4 hours or more based on that test that we did in November. Well, I came back in December for the filming. They were ready for a 4-hour swim. So they had underwater cameras, they had cameras on boats, they had drones in the air, they had all this going on, but they had everything planned out for 4 hours. I did it in like 54 minutes. I just swam as hard as I can, and it was about 900 yards. So I pulled this 27-ton car ferry, across Newport Beach Harbor, about 900 yards, in 54 minutes, and nobody expected that. I didn't expect that. And so the funny thing is when we got to the finish line, they weren't ready to film it at the finish line. So we recreated the finish like 3 different times. So they had every camera angle. So even after I finished it, we had to keep backing the car ferry up about 50 yards and restage the finish. So not only was it the 900 yards, but I had to do, I would say, the last 50 yards an additional 3 times. And we had to reenact it exactly the same, each time. So, I mean, the event was very, very real, but to get the camera shots at the end, I had to keep recreating the ending. Yeah, a great, fun experience. And, Stanley Superhumans is seen all over the world. So it's just great when I hear from
Yes.
people on the other side of the planet, who enjoyed the show.
So we were talking about sports, right? You mentioned that you are a Tigers fan. So I am assuming that you are a hardcore MLB fanatic.
Yeah,
So
baseball is my number
so
one sport. I actually played semi-pro ball, had hoped to play
okay.
professionally. And so to be a professional athlete in one form or another is rewarding to me. But, you know, baseball has always been number one. And, I'd do anything for just a cup of coffee in the show.
So what about Derek Jeter? Is he your favorite player?
Oh, you got to have a lot of respect for Derek Jeter. I mean, he played for the Yankees.
Yeah.
So, it's hard for me to like the Yankees too much being a Tigers fan. But Derek Jeter
Yes.
grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, as I'm sure you're aware. I grew up in Grand
Yes.
Rapids, Michigan. So, Derek grew up like just 60 miles south of where I grew up.
That's
And so
interesting.
we have a real affinity as far as, having Michigan connections. And I mean, you've got to respect Derek Jeter. I mean, one of the greatest of all times. And he played the game right. I mean, he really played the game the way the game's supposed to be played. I mean, old school. So yeah, hats off to Derek Jeter, even though he's a New York Yankee.
Yes. So any favorite player from the Tigers? Anyone that you love to the core?
Well, yeah, right now, I'm excited about their young core. They've got Spencer Torkelson, they've got Riley Green, and Kerry Carpenter. Talk about somebody that I really have a lot of respect for. Kerry Carpenter was a 19th round draft pick out of Virginia Tech University. And I mean, salute to anybody who's been drafted into the pros. But that is a low round draft pick comparative to the players who usually make it to the big leagues. And he not only excelled through the minor leagues, but he's excelling on the major league level. And the scouts did not see that coming. And to Kerry's credit, he worked really, really hard and made adjustments on his swing. He is so level headed. I mean, when you hear him in interviews, he is. If you can get Kerry Carpenter on your show, I would suggest it. He's just he has got the right mindset. He's got so much self awareness and just a very, very modest guy. And when he knows he needs to make a correction to improve his game, he admits it and he goes to work and he gets it done. So I'm excited about him as part of the young core. And looking back in the Tigers' history, well, you got to love Al Kaline. Alan Trammell's my favorite. I had a chance to meet Mr. Trammell on a couple different occasions. What a class act he is. Mickey Stanley, he's from my hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Had a chance to meet him a couple times as well. Just another real class act. Those are some of my favorites for sure.
Yes. So just to understand more about your love for sports, I believe that you almost missed the U.S. Olympic snowshoe team. So, are you aware of people like Michaela Schifrin or Sean White or Lindsey Vonn who have carried the U.S. legacy in winter sports? So, any
Oh,
any favorites from there?
well, yeah, absolutely. It's funny because winter sports was never my big forte. But yeah, White and Vaughn, I mean, yeah, they excelled to the top of their respective sports. With me, it was a whim. Running was part of my game as a triathlete. And so in the wintertime, me and my buddies would go snowshoeing. And it was just part of training. Well, my friends told me about this snowshoe race up in Cadillac, Michigan, north of where I live. And they asked me, hey, would you like to, make a weekend of it and we'll enter the race? I'm like, okay, sure. So enter the race. I ended up finishing seventh overall. And they asked the top 10 finishers to come up on stage. And the MC said something to the effect of, hey, let's give these top 10 all a big round of applause because they are now advancing to the nationals for the tryouts for the Olympic snowshoe team.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
I thought he was joking, that I had just qualified for the Olympic tryout finals. I did not know this was like a quarterfinal event. Apparently, there were 4 different tryout events across the United States. And in these races, they took the top 10, and then those 40 people went to the nationals. And if you finished in the top 5 at nationals, you made the Olympic team. So I was in the
Right.
top 40. I was in the top 40 in the country on a whim. And so I thought, well, I better start training because I know that sounds funny. I mean, I had been training, but not training.
Do you follow track and field or no?
Yeah, to be honestly, no, not really. Because, as a former marathon runner and, ultra marathon runner, no, traditional track and field, I mean, haven't really followed it that close. Got a tremendous amount of respect for those people. But yeah, the long distance stuff, marathon, ultra marathon, it's a little bit different.
In one of your interviews after your eccentric challenges, you had mentioned that you lost your singing voice. So, are you a fan of singing a lot?
Yeah, I was really kind of joking, but there is a little bit of a story there. Yeah, after all my swims, I've got my voice back pretty good right now. I mean, 'cause it's been a little more than a week since my swim. But after a long swim, when you've been inhaling and breathing right above the surface of the water, you're inhaling all this moisture, and it really does destroy your voice. In this last swim, when the boat came out about 30 some miles, they're trying to talk to me. I opened my mouth to talk, and nothing came out. There was no voice at all. But to answer your question about singing, I mean, it is kind of funny. I actually did sing with a band for 3-4 months back in the '90s. It was another thing that was just kind of crazy, and it was like a whim, where it was this restaurant owner who had music every weekend in his restaurant, and he had a band himself. So oftentimes he would be, well, really, all of the time, I guess, he was the house band. So he owned the restaurant and he was the house band. He was like rhythm guitar. And he wanted to have this promotion where people sang for their supper, so to speak. You got a free meal if you sang with the band. So I
Right.
helped him promote it because I'm in marketing. I wrote a press release for him and everything. So anyway, the restaurant's packed and nobody wanted to sing. And so he's begging me to come up and sing with the band to get everybody started. And I'm saying, oh man, no, I'm not going to do that. I helped you write the press release. I brought the crowd in, but no, I'm not going to sing. Well, he twisted my arm, got me up there, and I sang. Well, the crowd asked for an encore. I always joked that the crowd, they needed to get out more and see some real singers. But I had fun, and they started calling and saying, hey, is Jim going to sing with the band from now on? So every Friday night, I was singing with this band for like about 3 or 4 months. And it was like classic rock and some maybe like country rock, that type of thing. We had fun. I mean, it is fun. You've probably heard, athletes want to be singers or actors, and singers and
Yes.
actors want to be athletes. So I've also been in a few independent films. So I've actually done all 3 of those
Oh,
things. You know,
okay.
athletics is my
Would
forte,
you
but
like to tell us about it?
yeah,
The
yeah, a
films part?
couple of independent films. One was called Loogie Lad, and one was called Drama Class. So you might be able to Google those and find
Okay.
those. They were just bit roles. They were not big roles, but it was fun. Still to be on scene, see how it all worked, to be part of the entire production, and yeah, it really was a lot of fun. And So yeah, I'm an athlete who kind of, would also like to be a singer and would also, also like to be an
Yes.
actor. So,
Yes. So let's just talk about swimming more. Are you familiar with Michael Phelps and Katie Ledecky at all?
oh, very much so. Very much so. Mr. Phelps and I have not had a chance to meet, but we've been quoted in some of the same articles, and we've commented on each other, very respectfully. You know, while I was doing the open water stuff, I mean, he was the best in the world in the pool. And so what we do is very, very different. I'm speed wise, I'm a pretty average swimmer as far as how fast I am. Never going to compete with Michael Phelps for speed, but Mr.
Yes.
Phelps was also gracious enough to say, hey, what Jim does is at a different level. In the open water, it's a completely different thing. And so, I was flattered when he said that. And so, yeah, I mean, Michael Phelps also, going to the University of Michigan. There's some home state ties here as well. So, and I also really, really admire how he's come forward and been public about some of his struggles with mental health. I really, really admire that. And because he's in a position where he has an audience, and that's a very, very important message that he's putting out there. So, yeah, salute to Mr. Phelps.
So just a fun little question. What if there comes a day when you and Michael Phelps take Michigan? Who do you think will win?
Oh, he's going to kick my butt in the pool. Um, my guess is if we did it like a swim across, we did a swim in a pool, it's not even going to be close. Like I said, I'm average speed. He's a rocket. Um, in the open water, my guess is like if we were swimming, trying to swim across Lake Michigan, or not even necessarily that far, but he's going to start out ahead of me. He's definitely going to start out ahead of me. But over time, I'd catch him. Over time, I'd catch him and I'd pass him because, um, as he said too, it is a different level. It's a different kind of thing. The strength and the endurance is different than pool swimming. They're
Yep.
both they're different. Is not one's not better than the other, but there's similarities, but there's some big differences as well. And so it would be really fun for us to get in the pool, and then it'd be really fun for us to get out in the open water as well.
Yes. Let's talk about some politics now, right? I believe
Uh
that
oh.
back in the day, you were almost you were almost appointed under Michigan, right? And obviously, you are playing a great part in the whole upbringing of the U.S. Coast Guard. That's your mission. So what exactly is it?
Well, yeah, actually, from 2006 to 2010, I was appointed by Michigan Governor Granholm to the Mentor Michigan Leadership Council. So, Governor Granholm and her husband, Dan Mulhern, founded Mentor Michigan. Basically, it's a big umbrella organization to further mentoring. And under that program, I founded the AIM program, which AIM, AIM, which is an acronym for Adventures in Mentoring. And so
Yep.
I worked with court involved youth and I matched them with positive adult role models. And we would train them in wilderness survival and in adventure racing. So, fun stuff, like um, um, mountain biking, climbing, paddling, and then important things, survival stuff like orienteering through the wilderness with a compass, building your own shelter, filtering your own water, building a fire without matches, things like this. And we would have 6 weeks of training with the mentors and the kids, and then it culminated in a weekend camp out where they would compete in an adventure race. The matches would compete against each other. And there would also be a wilderness survival challenge as well. And so I did that as a governor's appointee. along with some other swimming related events that you would expect somebody like me to do.
Yes.
That furthered mentoring in the state of Michigan. So I was honored to work under Governor Granholm during those years. And then I've always been a huge proponent of our military, and just I have so much respect for the veterans who served the country. And I mean,
Yep.
the valor of putting your life on the line um, is something that few could imagine unless they've done it. I have not done that myself. So, I mean, I can only imagine. And so, an event I managed for a number of years was the Mighty Mac Swim. And that was a 4 mile swim across the turbulent Straits of Mackinac that alongside the Mackinac Bridge. And that
Yep.
connects the Michigan's Lower Peninsula and Michigan's Upper Peninsula. And so that ended up being an international swim race with 400 swimmers, which we actually made history doing that. But the reason I bring that up is we supported disabled veterans, disabled combat veterans with that swim. And so then that swim, I didn't bring it back after the pandemic. We were shut down for 2 years. And then I decided to kind of go in a different direction after that. And I'm working on some things as far as bringing back another public event. But in my own event, to get across Lake Michigan swimming self-sufficiently alone, I chose to support the Chief Petty Officers Association of the U.S. Coast Guard. The
Yes.
Coast Guard has supported me for 25 years, and I've worked hand in hand with them. We've done safety videos, water safety videos together. There's no way I could have accomplished what I've accomplished in these 25 years without their support. So I wanted to give back. And the Chief Petty Officers Association is really cool because it supports the men and women of the U.S. Coast Guard for special needs that might come up. One recent example is one of the enlisted experienced a house fire, and insurance didn't cover everything. Well, this charity kicked in and helped pay for some of that, and so this also helps cover medical expenses that aren't completely covered by insurance. They also get involved in community projects in the communities where the Coast Guard is located. So the community benefits as well. And of course, we all benefit by the service that's put forth by the men and
Yes.
women of the U.S. Coast Guard. And of course, the Coast Guard, that also includes Homeland Security, which of course in this day and age is tremendously
Okay.
important.
Right. You're talking about politics, being appointed under the governor of Michigan and so many good things like the military and stuff. Did you ever get a chance to meet any of the presidents?
I haven't met them face to face, but I received two letters from President Clinton,
Oh,
and
okay.
that was a thrill. One was after I swam across, was it Lake Michigan or Lake Huron? I think it was Lake Huron. After I swam across Lake Huron, he sent me a congratulatory letter, which I thought it was Lake Huron, which I thought was really cool. It was a thrill. And then I was being nominated for one of the awards I won. He sent me a congratulatory letter after that as well. Um, and so it was one of the awards for helping children. And so, that was a huge thrill. So President Clinton really did go the extra mile and, reaching out to American citizens and, connecting to people who've done something maybe a little bit extraordinary. So, that was really cool. Those were a couple of real big honors. There's a couple of honors that I've received, not from presidents, but that I really hold dear, that are probably mean more to me, actually. No offense to the president of the United States, but that probably mean a little bit
Yeah.
more to me. One was my hometown, Byron Center, Michigan. Small town, not so small anymore, actually. But when I was growing up, it was a small town, uh, a southern suburb of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And when I first swam across Lake Michigan 25 years ago, they threw a parade and they gave me my own day. I'd finished the swim on
Oh,
August 3rd.
okay.
And so every August 3rd in Byron Center, Michigan is Jim the Shark Dreyer Day. Yeah, to have another culture adapt me as one of their own, you know, to me Nothing means more to me than that.
So now, with August 1st being your birthday and August 3rd Jim Dreyer Day, it's safe enough to say that it is a week full of celebrations.
Yeah, yeah. This was a special year in August, like you said, both with the 25th anniversary of my career and my birthday. And 2023 is actually the 30th anniversary of my business, Event Marketing Enterprises. So there was a lot of key numbers this year. And as far as age, I'm not all caught up in numbers, but I'm thinking you only turn 60 once, you only get one 25th anniversary. This was a good way. It's been a number of years since I swam across all five Great Lakes. This would be a good way to kind of put a cap on all of that and celebrate the past while doing something today, that's noteworthy.
Yep, yep. I'd like for quite some time now, the achievement is like everybody, the whole world is talking about your attempt in Lake Michigan. But however, you said because of the weather and because of the attempt getting cancelled out, you said that there will be a third attempt by Jim Dreyer. Can we? Is it safe enough to say that we might see it on August 1st next year?
Well, that's the thing. I set out to swim 25 miles further than I did 25 years ago and to do it alone, pulling the weight of
Yep.
my supplies. I really raised the bar and we had a heck of an adventure. But yeah, I'm not good at walking away from a goal before it's achieved. And so, to be honest, yeah, I'm right now really working on figuring out 2024. Um, I know I want to try this again. I know I do. And I know I'm not really going to be satisfied until I get it done. I mean, just being honest, and anybody who knows me knows that.
Yes.
So, I did have other plans. I mentioned how I managed the Mighty Max swim and how I just continued that after the pandemic. And I'm working on a public event to replace that event. Well, that's in my plans for 2024. And I've got other plans as well. So, I really wanted to get my personal swim done this year. I really did. Well, if that gets pushed back to next year, I don't want to put all of my other 2024 plans on hold, but I may need to juggle them a little bit. And that's what I'm figuring out right now is what are my goals for 2024 and how am I going to juggle it? But to answer your question, yeah, to me, I really want to get this swim done. So, that I'm juggling things with that goal in mind that I'm going to get this swim done.
Yep, yep. You just mentioned that there will be a public event. That intrigues me to ask you. Are there going to be any celebrities or maybe famous people that we might come across besides Jim Dreyer?
Well, this I think this would be an event that you would have to qualify for. And so anybody who
Oh,
qualifies for this
okay.
event is going to be a top athlete. So, I think everybody there, you know, are are going to be worthy of a lot of public attention and media attention. And wherever they're from, especially, their home states in the US or their province in Canada or from wherever they may be, certainly their hometown media would probably rally around them. And it's hard to say how big the names might be. Another thing, too, is this will also involve the U.S. Coast Guard. And the
Okay.
U.S. Coast Guard, their rescue swimmers, I mean, they're heroes. I mean, their rescue swimmers are highly trained, special forces.
Yep.
And so, their whole motto is so others may live. So they put their lives on the line to save lives. And we're kicking around the idea of getting some U.S. Coast Guard rescue swimmers involved in this as well, because we're going to support the Coast Guard. And so these rescue swimmers to me are the face of what this is all about. So that's a little premature yet, but I would like to think that the Coast Guard themselves, the rescue swimmers, may have a bit of a presence in this event.
Just one last question before we wrap this up. I really want to know. See, I know that your mantra is quitting is never an option. So keeping that in mind, what advice would you like to give to our fans, to the younger generation, and to everybody in this world?
Well, you know what? I mean, quitting is not an option. Yeah, that is my mantra. And, perseverance is so important. Um, I always say that perseverance is like climbing a mountain. It's you're not going to make it to the summit in a blizzard, but if you survive the blizzard, then you can make it to the summit. So it's not always a direct
Yeah.
ascent to the summit. Either switchbacks, you're going to go left, you're going to go right. You may take a few steps down to take more steps to go up. Um, Look at your entire journey is just that. It's a journey. When you're successful, yeah, you want to celebrate that success, but celebrate your entire journey and know that you may have to take a few steps back, to take a few steps forward. You might lose a battle, but you never lose the war until you surrender. So that's the way I'm looking at it right now. Is okay. Lake Michigan just won this last battle, but I put up a heck of a fight. I did not call for rescue,
Yeah.
and it delivered a flurry of punches, and I took those punches. I mean, I was still standing. I was still in the fight. So you may have won that battle, but the war's not over until I say it is. So that's what I'd say to all the young viewers: is you know what? Um, Celebrate your achievements along the way, but also realize that your setbacks, you can learn a lot from your setbacks and expect that it's not going to be a direct ascent to the top. And when you do make the summit, it's going to be that much sweeter because of how you persevered and pushed through those setbacks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's all from my end. Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you for your valuable time. It was great. You are an inspiration for all of us. So thank you for taking out time to have this great and essentially sports.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, this was a pleasure, an absolute pleasure. So, anytime, happy to
Yes.
come back, and hopefully next time we'll be talking about how I made it across.
Yes, yes. Also, like you mentioned about getting Mr. Carpenter on the show. If we manage to do that, we'll be the first ones to reach out to you.
Terrific, terrific. Hey, thank you so much. It's
Yes,
been a real pleasure.
yes. Thank you so much.